Hello, welcome to my dusty Jeepster. Today I want to see if I can flatten out this hood. I got a good start on it. From the driver's seat, looking up across this hood when it was really shiny, it was really wavy and it was a little concerning. I was really worried. But now that I've been sanding this down, what I'm finding out is this hood has the original paint with the original primer, and then on top of that it has a high build primer that was put on really, really thick, and then more paint. So fortunately, that high build primer just never got sanded correctly. So these waves had a lot to do with how that primer was applied. And now that I'm sanding with my big long sanding board, I've got 180 grit sandpaper on it. It's just flattening this out really nice. Along the side of the hood, you can look down and it was really ripply. Well, it looks like they just sanded it with their fingers. So it was finger marks. The metal is actually quite straight. This side, sadly, is not as perfect as that side. So, block sanding this side down, I had the same thing here, really ripply right here. It looks like it probably had some dents in it, and then they used some hammer and dolly and smoothed it out. Well, fortunately, again, with all this primer that they had on there, as I sanded it with my lawn board, man, it just flattened right out. There's some areas, it's pretty obvious, there were some dings, and the primer and paint has filled those dings, but most of this hood, just a really thick coat of primer surfacer again. I can block sand this all down, and it's just going to be fantastic. It was very ripply along the back side of this hood. Again, it's sanding out beautifully. Very fortunate that this hood had so much paint and primer on it, because it's really flattening out great. But as I sanded this area right here, there's a low spot right here. So now you can see I've got an area here where I've sanded through the paint and I'm down to bare metal, and I'm sanding through here. I'm not quite to bare metal yet. So there's a low spot right here, and there's a high spot here, and you can see it's oil canning, as they call it. So this is stretched, and this is pushed down. Somebody might have sat on it here and they've pushed it down, but I'm suspecting that they probably tried to work this and it did some hammer and dolly work, because there's some marks that are starting to show up all over through this paint as I cross sand it and just keep going back and forth. So I think they've tooled this and they've stretched it. So I need to get rid of that. So if I push this down, now I've got a low spot there. So now this rib is low. So I don't want to disturb this rib. So if I start working this and I get that to go down, then I'm going to mess this up. And at the same time, I get this down and I still have a low spot right here. So I've got to do both. I've got to bring this up and bring this down, and then what I'm hoping is if I get some kind of support on the back side of this right here, I can hold it up. At the same time, I shrink and bump this down. And then I got to get rid of this oil canning without damaging that. So I went ahead and I've added a shovel with a nice big flat handle on the top of it. It's kind of rounded a little bit. It works out just perfectly once I propped it up underneath the car, that this is all solid now. And when I put my board across, it flattens out pretty good. So this area, I actually need to do a reverse shrink. I need to get this to shrink upwards because it pulls this right down and it keeps this rib perfect. So judging from the marks that are along this rib, I would suspect somebody put their butt cheek on here and they've pushed it down. So I've got to get it to come up, and it's not staying up with me working it. But now that I've got it just perfect, I'm going to work around this a little bit and see if I can get it to stay put without adding any heat to it. And maybe if I just add a little bit of heat here, then I'll be able to get it to change without having to shrink it right here. So I'm going to attempt that now, because on a big flat area like this, man, if I can keep from having to start doing heat shrink, heating it up, bumping it, heating it up, bumping it, that would be great. My support is right here. I'm going to try to bring that support down here a little bit and see if I can bump this down just a hair. So now as I move this support underneath here, I'm seeing this oil canning right around here. So I've moved some of this back. But I've got to get it to stay. As long as it keeps oil canning, it's not going to stay up where it belongs. I could just fill this hood, just put a big thick coat of filler on it and sat it down smooth, and it would just stiffen it up and get rid of it. That's the easy way out, and that's what most people do. There's ways that you can metal finish this, so you don't have to use filler. Just a good thick coat of primer. And I had a 69L Camino 40 years ago, and an old timer body man helped me flatten out the roof because somebody had gotten up on the roof and jumped up and down on it, so it had dings everywhere. And it was amazing that we were able to get that hood completely flat again with just primer, no filler. Little heat, a little bumping, many hours, and it's amazing. So you can do this, and we'll keep working on it, and hopefully we can do it without adding a lot of heat. So what I'm doing is I just keep moving my support to the bottom of that oil can where it wants to stay down, work along both of these ribs, and if I can bump this rib up and bump this one and give it a little bit more of a contour, should be able to get it to stay. I've got this line perfect, so I've got to be careful not to distort that one. And like I said, I've got this one perfect, and so far it's staying there. Man, it's staying there. It's staying where I want it. I've got just a little bit of a high spot right here. And if I can bring that down and not get this oil canning back, we're good. I don't want to use a hard dolly, because if I use a dolly like this on the back side, and if I hit that with the metal sandwiched, I'm going to start stretching it. And that's the last thing I want to do. I do not want to stretch out this metal anywhere. I want to use something that's soft enough that if I end up hitting it, I'm not going to do any stretching. I might put a dent, but I can work that back out. But if you do use a dolly like this, try to work around that. Try not to hit it direct. Now, if you've got a high spot and you need to move it down, go ahead and bump it down, but gentle. Especially in an area like this, you can stretch it and start getting things to move around so quickly. I've got the board right in this rib. I'm holding this rib solid. I'm holding this heavy metal dolly right inside of that rib, and I'm getting a little more aggressive with it. But again, I don't want to hit the dolly. I have been working this and working it. Block of wood underneath the back side, running around the edges of the wood, not hitting it. And I just kept finding these high spots and just bumping them down gently. I've spent over an hour just working this area, and I did not have to apply any heat. I can feel a little waviness right here, but this is all solid. And the oil can, there are areas where you can make it go in and out, but it's not going to wave going down the road. It's solid. This is awesome. It's all straight now. I mean, I'm straight at the peak. I'm straight at this contour, and I am completely flat all the way across. There's just some tiny little wavers that heavy primer will take care of all this. I don't need to put any filler in this hood. It's awesome. Just real heavy coat of primer, block sand it. Oh, it brings up a point. When you're block sanding an area like this, I mean, you can move this. I mean, I can push down on this enough that I can move it, and I'll end up sanding off the high spot and leaving the low spot, and it'll pop back up. And then you got a high spot here in the middle. So do yourself a favor. If you're going to be doing large areas like this, use a large sanding board and sharp sandpaper, good quality sandpaper. If you end up going through the paint onto the metal, you kill your sandpaper pretty quick. So get it to where you're at that point, put on primer, sand it gently, let the sandpaper do the work. Get rid of all your high spots, find out what areas you need more primer, and sand it again. And as long as you're watching, you get a straight edge on there and you can see you've got good contact all the way. You could put a ton of primer on this, sand it down smooth, find the spots where you start to get a little bit shiny, thin areas, and you just have primer without a whole lot of build. It just will leave a fantastic finish on this hood. I put a block under this back edge here, and I gently bent it up. So this hood has a rise now to the back of it. It used to be perfectly flat. I designed that in. There's a support into the back of that. I gently bent that support up so that my hood contours into this firewall. The firewall was drastically angled. The hood came in straight. So I'm angling and swooping the hood, and then I'm going to take that front edge, the lead edge of the firewall, and get underneath and just gently bend that upwards and then fill it, and then it's just going to have this nice contour the way it should have been. Nothing wrong with it having a flat hood and a flat angle coming down, but when that vent was there, you didn't really notice that transition. But now, the way I'm going to have this so smooth and transition up to the windshield, it's going to have a nice gradual slope, and it's just going to have a really nice look and appeal to the eye as you look down these beautiful flat panels. Okay, now that I have the hood exactly where I want it, I'm going to finish this area up. There's some gaps underneath here that are pretty unsightly. Yeah, you've got to get down here to see the gaps, but if you're going to do something of a show car quality, with the mindset that, well, what if this ends up being a really nice show car and the judges do nitpick it? And judges get down here looking at it going, wow, this is really nice, too bad they left these big holes. I've had that happen. So I'm going to fill those. It's going to be a matter of having to weld in some little spots. I could show that in another video when I get around to getting to the back side of this. So I got to take the hood off and detail all the back side. But for now, I took a pretty good hammer and a block of wood to these edges and bumped them and pushed them down, because when they were spot welded, and I mentioned this in a prior video, when they were spot welded together with the inner reinforcing, they couldn't get a good clamp on it, so they just did the best they could. And then when they heated that thing up so hard, so hot, melted together, it just distorted this edge. So, like I say, I've taken a hammer to it, I've taken a block of wood to it, and I really shaped and moved these around to where I've got a really nice fit here. So I just need to get a sanding block like this, sand all these areas down. I've worked them a little bit with the hammer and dolly from the backside as much as I could. You kind of have to get a piece like this where you can kind of spoon into that edge and then tap it and work it. So I'm really excited with the way this fits now, how it all lines up with the grill shell. So just a matter of now sanding that down to bare metal. Just put a little skim coat of filler on here, sand that filler, and then I can prime this whole hood. It's really exciting to think that this is the only area on the hood I'm going to have any filler. And then just a little bit along that back edge, I've got some spots from where I hammered and dollied that edge to get that transition, that little kick up towards the windshield. So yeah, this is really exciting, because this hood, when I was sitting in the driver's seat looking across it, I thought, oh man, I need to find another hood. This hood's horrible. It's amazing what you can do with some patience. And that's really what it comes down to. Be patient, don't hit it too hard, don't bump directly on your dollies, and you won't get stretched metal. You can work it without having to get out the torch. But I have shown in prior videos, and I have another area that I need to do. So in one of my future videos, I will have to do some more shrinking and bumping on the side of the cowl on the driver's side. So since I didn't get to show you how to do any heat shrink, luckily, not on this video, we can bring that up again in the future. So, this is coming along. This is really exciting. I thought I was going to have to put a lot of hours in this hood, and it's turned out to be pretty quick. I do want to put some struts underneath the hood to hold the hood up. I've been experimenting with some struts that I had, and it's working out really good. I just need to get some stronger ones. I have some really, really strong ones that are too strong. Then I've got this set that are just a little bit too weak, so I've got another set ordered, and that'll be on my next video, putting these modern struts to hold the hood up. So it's pretty cool. All right, well, that'll be it for this video. Appreciate you tuning in. Give me a like if you like what I'm doing. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye for now.